I never thought I would watch a middle-aged woman in a designer pantsuit get arrested for grand theft auto in the parking lot of my construction business. But here we are in Phoenix, Arizona, where the Homeowner Association apparently thinks they run the entire city. My name is Keith Ingram, and I own a small demolition and hauling company called Desert Demolition Services. I have been running this business for 8 years now, ever since I moved to Arizona from Colorado to escape the cold winters and start fresh after my divorce. The business operates out of a lot I purchased in what used to be a commercial zone on the outskirts of Scottsdale, right where the fancy neighborhoods start bleeding into the industrial areas. When I bought the property back in 2018, it was zoned commercial, and I had all my permits in order. I parked my equipment there, including 3 dump trucks, an excavator, and various smaller vehicles and tools. Everything was legal, everything was proper, and I minded my own business. Then the Sunset Ridge Homeowner Association decided to expand their territory. It started about 6 months ago when I got my first letter. The envelope was cream-colored with gold embossing that read Sunset Ridge HOA Board of Directors in fancy script that probably cost more to print than my truck insurance. Inside was a letter informing me that due to recent boundary adjustments and neighborhood expansion, my property now fell under their jurisdiction. I would need to comply with all HOA regulations, including a restriction on commercial vehicles being stored on residential properties. I laughed it off at first. My property was not residential. It never had been. I called the city planning office and confirmed that my lot was still zoned commercial. The woman on the phone, Maria, was helpful and sent me updated documentation proving that nothing had changed. I made copies and sent them to the HOA with a polite letter explaining that they were mistaken. That should have been the end of it. Deborah Olson, the HOA president, did not see it that way. She showed up at my lot 2 weeks later in her white Mercedes SUV, wearing a coral blazer and white pants that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage. Her blonde hair was cut in that specific style that screams, "I want to speak to the manager," and her lips were pressed into a thin line of disapproval as she surveyed my property from behind oversized sunglasses. "Mr. Ingram," she said, pronouncing my name like it was something distasteful. "I am Deborah Olson, president of the Sunset Ridge HOA. We need to discuss your non-compliance." I was underneath one of my dump trucks at the time, changing the oil. I rolled out on my creeper and stood up, wiping my hands on a rag. "Madam, as I explained in my letter, this property is not part of your HOA. It is commercially zoned and always has been." "The boundaries were redrawn," she insisted. "Your property is now within our community limits and you need to follow our rules." "Those trucks are an eyesore and a safety hazard. They need to be removed immediately." I took a deep breath, reminding myself to stay professional. "I have documentation from the city planning office that says otherwise. My zoning has not changed." "You cannot just decide that my commercial property is suddenly residential." Her face flushed pink, clashing with her coral blazer. "I have been the president of this HOA for 7 years. I know what falls under our jurisdiction." "You have until the end of the month to remove all commercial vehicles, or we will take legal action." "You do what you need to do," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "But I am not moving my trucks. This is my business and this is where they belong." She drove away in a cloud of dust, and I went back to my oil change, thinking that would be the end of it. I had dealt with difficult people before. In the construction industry, you learn pretty quickly that some folks just like to make noise. Usually, they back down when they realize you are not going to fold. Deborah Olson was not a usual case. The letters started coming weekly. Each one was more threatening than the last, citing various HOA regulations that supposedly applied to my property. She claimed I was violating codes about noise levels, even though I never ran equipment before 8 in the morning or after 6 in the evening. She said my trucks were decreasing property values in the neighborhood. She even tried to fine me $200 for not maintaining my lawn to HOA standards, despite the fact that my lot was gravel and had never been intended to have a lawn. I ignored the fines. I kept copies of everything she sent me, along with my city documentation, and I consulted with a lawyer friend of mine named Rick who specialized in property law. He looked over everything and confirmed what I already knew. The HOA had no authority over my property. Their boundary expansion was wishful thinking at best and fraudulent at worst. They are trying to intimidate you into compliance, Rick told me over lunch at a diner near my lot. Keep documenting everything. If they take this to court, they will lose, and they probably know it. This Deborah woman is just hoping you do not want the hassle of fighting back. But I was not going anywhere. This was my livelihood, and I had worked too hard to build my business to let some power-hungry HOA president push me around. The situation escalated in ways I did not anticipate. One morning in late March, I arrived at my lot to find bright orange stickers plastered all over my dump trucks. They read "Violation" in big black letters and had the Sunset Ridge HOA logo printed at the bottom. I peeled them off, feeling my blood pressure rising with each sticker. There were at least 20 of them, stuck on windows, doors, even on the hood of my newest truck. I called the non-emergency police line to report vandalism, and an officer came out to take a report. Officer Martinez was a stocky guy in his 40s who had seen enough crazy HOA disputes to not be surprised by anything anymore. "This has been happening a lot in this area," he said, taking photos of the damage the stickers had left on my paint. "HOAs trying to expand their control. The stickers probably will not be enough for us to press charges unless you have camera footage of who did it." "I am getting cameras installed this week," I said, "but I know exactly who is behind this." "Even if you know, we need proof," Martinez said apologetically. "Document everything, and if it happens again, call us. If you get video evidence, we can potentially charge someone with vandalism or trespassing." I had security cameras installed the next day. 4 high-definition cameras covering every angle of my lot, all connected to cloud storage that kept footage for 30 days. It cost me $1,500, but it was worth the peace of mind. Good thing I did, because Deborah was just getting started. The cameras caught her 2 weeks later, at 7 in the morning, letting herself onto my property through the chain-link gate. I had not locked it because I came and went frequently throughout the day, and I had never had problems with theft before. The footage showed her walking around my trucks with a clipboard, taking notes and photos. She even tried the doors on one of my dump trucks, but I always kept them locked. I saved the footage and sent a copy to Rick, along with a formal cease and desist letter. Rick sent it to the HOA via certified mail, legally demanding that Deborah Olson and any other HOA representatives stop trespassing on my property. She responded by filing a lawsuit against me in small claims court. The claim was absurd. She was suing me for $5,000 for devaluing neighborhood property values and creating a public nuisance. She cited noise complaints from neighbors, even though I later found out she had fabricated most of them. When I checked with the few residential properties near my lot, none of them had ever complained. One older couple, the Hendersons, even told me they liked seeing my trucks because it made them feel like the neighborhood was still real and not just another cookie-cutter development. Rick helped me file a response, and we went to court in early May. The hearing was held in a small courtroom in downtown Scottsdale, with a judge who looked tired and unimpressed before we even started. Deborah showed up with a lawyer, a slick young guy in an expensive suit who probably charged more per hour than I made in a day. They presented their case, showing photos of my trucks and claiming they were a blight on the community. They brought in a supposed property valuation expert who testified that commercial vehicles in a residential area could decrease home values by up to 15%. When it was my turn, Rick presented all my documentation: city zoning maps, my business permits, The timeline showing I had owned and operated from this location long before the HOA even existed. He also presented my cease and desist letter and the video footage of Deborah trespassing on my property. The judge took about 5 minutes to make his decision. The plaintiff has failed to demonstrate that the defendant's property falls under HOA jurisdiction, he said flatly. The property in question is commercially zoned and has been since before the HOA was established. The defendant has provided ample evidence that he is in compliance with all city regulations. Case dismissed. Furthermore, Mr. Ingram, you would be within your rights to file a counter-suit for harassment and trespassing. I suggest the HOA reconsider their approach to this matter. I should have felt victorious walking out of that courtroom. Instead, I just felt tired. This whole situation had cost me time, money, and stress that I did not need. I had jobs to do, clients to serve, and I was spending my days dealing with legal nonsense instead. She is going to keep coming after you, Rick warned me as we stood in the courthouse parking lot. People like her do not take public humiliation well. Watch your back. He was right, but I did not expect what came next. Things were quiet for a few weeks after the court hearing. I started to think maybe Deborah had finally gotten the message and would leave me alone. My business was doing well. I had picked up a big contract to haul debris from a strip mall demolition, and I was staying busy enough that I did not have time to worry about HOA drama. Then, on a Tuesday morning in early June, I got the call that started everything. I was at a job site in Temp, supervising the loading of debris into one of my trucks, when my phone rang. The caller ID showed it was my lot's security system. I had set up alerts to notify me if there was any motion detected outside of normal hours, but this was 9 in the morning, well within normal business hours. I answered, expecting maybe a salesman or someone who had taken a wrong turn. Instead, I heard the sound of a truck engine starting. My stomach dropped. I pulled up the security camera app on my phone and watched in real time as one of my dump trucks, my newest one, began rolling toward the gate. I could see someone in the driver's seat, and as the camera angle shifted, I got a clear view of blonde hair and a coral blazer. Deborah Olson was stealing my dump truck. You have got to be kidding me, I said out loud, already running toward my personal vehicle. I called 911 as I drove, explaining the situation to the dispatcher as calmly as I could manage. Madam, someone is currently stealing one of my commercial vehicles from my business lot in Scottsdale. I have video evidence. The vehicle is a 2022 red Kenworth dump truck, license plate Arizona Commercial DMP 2847. The suspect is a white female, approximately 50 years old, blonde hair, wearing a coral-colored blazer. The dispatcher took my information and said officers were being dispatched to my location. I gave her the address of my lot and then tried to think about where Deborah might be taking my truck. She could not get far. The truck had a full tank of diesel, but it was big and obvious, and she had no idea how to drive it properly. I made it back to my lot in 20 minutes, breaking probably half a dozen traffic laws in the process. 2 police cruisers were already there, parked by the open gate. Officer Martinez was one of them, and he looked equal parts amused and frustrated when he saw me. Mr. Ingram, he said, we have been tracking your vehicle. The suspect drove it approximately 2 miles before pulling into a shopping center parking lot. She is still there. We have units on scene, but we wanted you to come identify the vehicle and confirm it was taken without permission. It was definitely taken without my permission, I said, feeling a mix of anger and disbelief. Did she say why she took it? She is claiming she has the authority to impound vehicles that violate HOA regulations, Martinez said, and I could see him fighting back a smile. She says your truck was illegally parked on HOA property. That is insane. This is my property. I have all the documentation. We are aware of your ongoing dispute from the previous reports you filed. This is definitely going to result in charges, though, grand theft auto most likely. I rode with Martinez to the shopping center, a strip mall about 2 miles from my lot that had a grocery store and a few smaller shops. My dump truck was parked sideways across several spaces in the far corner of the lot, and there were 3 police cruisers surrounding it with lights flashing. A small crowd of shoppers had gathered to watch the scene. Deborah was standing next to the truck, still wearing her coral blazer, arguing with 2 officers. Her face was red, and she was gesturing wildly with her hands. Even from a distance, I could hear her raised voice. "I am the president of the Sunset Ridge HOA. That vehicle is in violation of community standards, and I have every right to remove it from HOA property. Madam, as we have explained multiple times, you do not have the authority to take someone else's vehicle," one of the officers said patiently. "That is theft." "It is not theft, it is enforcement of HOA regulations." I approached with Martinez, and Deborah's eyes locked onto me. If looks could kill, I would have dropped dead right there in the parking lot. "You," she shouted, pointing at me. "This is all your fault. If you had just followed the rules like everyone else, none of this would have happened." "Madam, please calm down," Martinez said firmly. "Mr. Ingram, can you confirm this is your vehicle and that you did not give this woman permission to take it?" "That is absolutely my truck, and I definitely did not give her permission to take it," I said. "I have video footage from my security cameras showing her entering my lot and hot wiring the vehicle." "I did not hot wire anything," Deborah protested. "The keys were in it." I stared at her. "The keys were not in it. I never leave keys in my vehicles. You would have needed to either break the ignition or know how to bypass the security system." One of the other officers, a younger woman with sharp eyes, spoke up. "Madam, we observed marks on the ignition consistent with tampering." "Did you use any tools to start this vehicle?" Deborah's face went from red to pale in about 2 seconds. I could see the moment she realized how much trouble she was actually in. Her lawyer had not prepared her for criminal charges. Her HOA power had not prepared her for real consequences. "I want to speak to my attorney," she said quietly. "That is your right," Martinez said. "But right now, I am placing you under arrest for grand theft auto and criminal trespassing. You have the right to remain silent." I watched as he read her Miranda rights and placed handcuffs on her wrists. She did not struggle, but she kept her chin up, trying to maintain some dignity even as she was being arrested in a grocery store parking lot while a crowd of people filmed on their phones. The other officers helped me figure out how to get my truck back to my lot. The ignition was damaged and I would need to have it repaired, but the truck was otherwise fine. I arranged for a tow truck to take it to my mechanic while I gave my statement to the police. The whole thing felt surreal. I had dealt with difficult clients, angry contractors, and complicated jobs, but I had never imagined I would be the victim of grand theft auto committed by an HOA president who thought she was above the law. The local news picked up the story by that evening. I started getting calls from reporters wanting interviews, but I declined most of them. Rick advised me to keep a low profile and let the legal system handle things. I did give one brief statement to a local newspaper, simply confirming the facts and saying I was glad the police had responded quickly. The story went viral on social media. Apparently, people love stories about HOA presidents getting arrested, especially when it involves something as ridiculous as stealing a dump truck. My phone did not stop buzzing with notifications for days. Friends I had not heard from in years were sending me links to articles and Reddit threads about the incident. The Sunset Ridge HOA went into crisis mode. An emergency meeting was called, and the board voted to remove Deborah as president pending the outcome of her criminal case. They also issued a public apology to me, stating that Deborah had acted alone and without board approval, and that the HOA would not be pursuing any further action against my property. I appreciated the apology, but I was not going to let them off that easily. Rick and I filed a civil lawsuit against both Deborah personally and the HOA as an organization, seeking damages for harassment, legal fees, the cost of security cameras, repairs to my truck, and emotional distress. We had documentation for everything, and Rick was confident we would win. Deborah's criminal case moved forward quickly. The evidence was overwhelming. Security camera footage showed her entering my property, approaching my truck, and spending several minutes working on the ignition before getting it started. The police found a screwdriver and wire cutters in her Mercedes that had traces of plastic and metal consistent with the damage to my truck's ignition. Her own words at the scene, where she admitted to taking the truck, were documented in multiple police reports. Her lawyer tried to argue that she had genuinely believed she had the authority to remove the vehicle, and that there was no criminal intent. The prosecutor was not buying it. "Ignorance of the law is not a defense," the prosecutor, a sharp woman named Angela Chen, told me when we met to go over my testimony. "She knew she did not have the legal right to take your truck. She had been told multiple times by your lawyer, and by a judge that she had no authority over your property. She chose to take the law into her own hands, and that is a crime." The case went to trial in August. I had to take 2 days off work to testify, which was frustrating, but I wanted to see this through. I owed it to myself and to every other person who had been bullied by an overzealous HOA. The courtroom was packed. Apparently, the case had attracted enough attention that people were showing up just to watch. I recognized a few faces from my neighborhood, including the Hendersons, who gave me encouraging nods when I walked in. Deborah sat at the defense table looking smaller than I remembered. She had traded her bright blazers for a conservative navy suit, and her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. Her lawyer was doing his best, but there was not much he could work with. I took the stand and answered questions from both the prosecutor and the defense attorney. I explained the history of the dispute, the court case, the harassment, and finally the theft of my truck. I stayed calm and factual, just telling the truth. The defense attorney tried to paint me as uncooperative and unwilling to work with the HOA, but it did not land well. When he asked if I had considered moving my business to avoid conflict, I looked him straight in the eye and said, "Why would I move my legal, permitted business because someone else wants to pretend they have authority they do not have?" The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. They found Deborah guilty of grand theft auto and criminal trespassing. The judge scheduled sentencing for the following month. In September, I sat in the courtroom again as the judge handed down Deborah's sentence. She received 2 years of probation, 300 hours of community service, and was ordered to pay restitution for the damage to my truck and my legal fees. She also had to pay fines to the state. The judge gave her a stern lecture before dismissing the court. "Mrs. Olson, you held a position of responsibility in your community, and you abused that position," he said. "You harassed a business owner who was operating legally and within his rights. When your attempts to bully him did not work, you escalated to criminal behavior. You are fortunate that Mr. Ingram was not using that truck at the time you took it, and that no one was injured as a result of your actions. I hope you use this experience to reflect on your behavior and to understand that no one, not even an HOA president, is above the law." Deborah did not say anything. She just nodded and left the courtroom with her lawyer. The civil case settled out of court a few weeks later. The HOA's insurance company did not want to go to trial, and they offered me a settlement that covered all my legal fees, the cost of my security system, repairs to my truck, lost wages from time spent dealing with the situation, and a significant amount for emotional distress. I agreed to the settlement with the condition that the HOA also had to publicly acknowledge in writing that my property was not and never had been under their jurisdiction. They agreed. I used some of the settlement money to upgrade my lot. I paved a section for parking, added better lighting, and installed a proper fence with a locked gate. I also put up a large sign that read, "Desert Demolition Services Established 2018 Commercially Zoned Property." Life slowly returned to normal. My business kept growing. The story of the HOA president who stole a dump truck became one of those legendary local tales that people brought up at barbecues and bar conversations. I was recognized occasionally when I was out in Scottsdale, usually by people who wanted to shake my hand and tell me their own HOA horror stories. The Sunset Ridge HOA elected a new president, a reasonable guy named Tom who actually called me to apologize personally for everything that had happened. He assured me that the new board had no interest in pursuing any claims against my property, and that they had revised their policies to prevent future overreach. I appreciated that, though I kept my security cameras running just in case. Deborah completed her community service and probation without incident as far as I heard. I saw her once, about a year after the trial, at a hardware store. She was in the paint aisle, looking at color samples. She saw me too, and for a moment, we just looked at each other. Then she turned and walked away quickly, abandoning her shopping cart. I did not feel angry anymore. I just felt tired thinking about how much time and energy had been wasted on her crusade against my trucks. She had lost her position, her reputation, and had a criminal record because she could not accept that she did not have power over everyone and everything. It was a valuable lesson, even if it had come at a high cost for both of us. My lawyer Rick and I stayed friends, and we still got lunch occasionally at that same diner. He used my case as an example when teaching seminars about property rights and HOA law. I became something of a folk hero in the anti-HOA community online, though I tried not to let it go to my head. I was just a guy who wanted to run his business in peace. The Hendersons, the older couple who lived near my lot, started bringing me cookies every few months. Mrs. Henderson said I had stood up for what was right, and that meant something in a world where too many people just rolled over when faced with authority, even illegitimate authority. "You did not just fight for yourself," she told me one afternoon while dropping off a batch of chocolate chip cookies. "You fought for everyone who has been pushed around by these HOA tyrants. My sister lives in Florida, and she has been fined thousands of dollars for the most ridiculous things. Different colored mailbox, garden gnomes in her yard, parking her car in her own driveway instead of the garage. It has gotten out of control." I told her I appreciated the support, and I meant it. The whole ordeal had shown me that there was a real problem with HOA overreach in America. And while I had not set out to be some kind of activist, I was glad my case had brought attention to the issue. Looking back now, more than a year after Deborah's arrest, I can see how the whole situation changed me. I am more careful about documenting things. I am quicker to stand up for myself when someone tries to push me around. And I have a much better understanding of property law than I ever wanted or expected to have. My business is thriving. I have hired 2 more drivers and bought another dump truck to keep up with demand. The new truck has an advanced security system that cannot be hot-wired, and I keep all my vehicles locked with keys secured in a safe in my office. I still get calls occasionally from reporters wanting to do follow-up stories, or from people facing their own HOA disputes asking for advice. I help when I can, usually by referring them to Rick or other lawyers who specialize in property rights. The sign I put up on my lot has become a local landmark of sorts. People driving by stop to take photos with it. A few have become clients after seeing the sign and hearing my story. Turns out that standing your ground against injustice is good for business. Sometimes, on quiet mornings when I am at my lot before the crews arrive, I think about that day in the grocery store parking lot, watching Deborah get arrested. I think about how she genuinely believed she had the right to take my truck, how her sense of authority had become so warped that she could not see the line between HOA enforcement and criminal behavior. It is a cautionary tale about what happens when people get a little bit of power and convince themselves that power makes them special, that rules apply to everyone except them. Deborah was not evil. She was not a criminal mastermind. She was just a person who got so caught up in her role as HOA president that she forgot she was still just a citizen, subject to the same laws as everyone else. The community has mostly moved on from the scandal. The Sunset Ridge HOA operates quietly now under new leadership. Property values in the area have continued to rise, despite Deborah's claims that my trucks would destroy the neighborhood. Life goes on. I keep a framed copy of the judge's dismissal from the initial HOA lawsuit hanging in my office, next to my business licenses and permits. It is a reminder that sometimes you have to stand your ground and fight for what is right, even when it would be easier to just give in. My phone rings, pulling me out of my thoughts. It is a new client asking for an estimate on hauling debris from a home renovation. I grab my clipboard and keys, double-checking that my truck is locked before heading out. Just another day running a business in Scottsdale, Arizona, where the weather is hot. The HOAs are sometimes crazy, and dump trucks are secured with the best locks money can buy. I never imagined that owning a demolition company would involve court cases, viral news stories, and watching someone get arrested for stealing my truck. But I guess that is life. You deal with what comes your way, you stand up for yourself, and you make sure to get everything on camera. The settlement money has been invested back into the business and into a nice emergency fund. Rick says I should write a book about my experience, and maybe someday I will. For now, I am content to just run my business, serve my clients, and enjoy the fact that I can park my trucks on my own property without worrying about someone trying to tow them or steal them. Well, I still worry a little. That is why I upgraded to the premium security system with facial recognition and automatic alerts. Once you have had an HOA president hot wire your dump truck, you learn to be prepared for anything. The Phoenix sun beats down as I drive to my appointment, the city sprawling out in every direction under the endless blue sky. This is home now, this desert city with its mix of Old West charm and modern development, where neighborhoods battle over paint colors and commercial lots, and where sometimes the most unexpected people end up on the wrong side of the law. I turn on the radio and catch the tail end of a news story about another HOA dispute across town. This one involves someone's chicken coop and angry neighbors. I shake my head and smile. At least it has not escalated to vehicle theft. My story became a case study in what not to do for HOA boards across the state. Rick tells me that he has been contacted by multiple HOAs wanting legal advice on how to avoid similar situations. He always tells them the same thing. Know your boundaries, respect property rights, and do not try to enforce rules you do not have the authority to enforce. Simple advice, but apparently it needs to be said. The construction industry has its challenges, but at least those challenges make sense. Difficult terrain, tight deadlines, demanding clients, those are all things I can work with. Random HOA presidents deciding they own property they do not own and stealing trucks to prove a point. That is a level of crazy I was not prepared for and hope never to deal with again. I pull up to the client's house, a nice ranch-style home in Gilbert that needs a full backyard renovation. The homeowner, a friendly guy named Carlos, meets me at the door and walks me through what he needs. We talk about timelines, costs, and logistics. It is straightforward, professional, and exactly the kind of interaction I built my business on. I heard about your situation with that HOA lady, Carlos says as we are wrapping up. That was wild, man. Good for you for not backing down. I appreciate that, I say. I was just trying to run my business, did not expect it to turn into a whole thing. That is how it always happens, he laughs. You mind your own business and then someone else decides to make it their business. My brother-in-law had an HOA try to fine him for parking his work van in his driveway. He is a plumber. Where else is he supposed to park it? We commiserate about HOA overreach for a few more minutes before I head out with a signed contract and a deposit check. Another satisfied customer, another job for my crew. The months continue to pass. Deborah finishes her probation and community service. The Sunset Ridge HOA continues to operate without trying to expand into commercial properties. My business grows steadily, and I am considering hiring another driver to keep up with demand. Rick calls me one afternoon in late November with interesting news. "You are not going to believe this," he says. "I just got contacted by a state legislator who wants to introduce a bill limiting HOA authority and establishing clearer guidelines for enforcement. She read about your case and wants to use it as an example of why the legislation is needed. Would you be willing to testify if it gets to that point?" I think about it for a moment. Testifying before the state legislature was not something I had ever imagined doing, but if it could help prevent other people from going through what I went through, it seemed worth it. "Yeah, I would do that," I tell him, "if it helps fix the system I am in." "Great, I will let her know. This could actually lead to some real changes, Keith. Your case might end up meaning something beyond just your situation." After we hang up, I sit in my office looking at my various certificates and permits on the wall. It is funny how life works out. I moved to Arizona to start over, to build a business and live quietly. Instead, I ended up in the middle of a legal battle that made headlines and might actually lead to changes in state law, not the path I planned, but I will take it. As winter approaches and the Phoenix heat finally breaks into something manageable, I reflect on everything that happened. The harassment, the court cases, the theft, the arrests, the settlements. It has been a long, strange journey from that first cream-colored envelope to where I am now. But I am still here, still running my business, still parking my trucks on my lot. Deborah is gone from the HOA, facing the consequences of her actions. The system worked eventually, even if it took longer and cost more than it should have. I lock up my office for the day, setting the security system and checking the cameras one more time. My trucks are lined up neatly in their spots, locked and secure. The sun is setting over the desert, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Tomorrow I will have more jobs, more clients, more loads to haul. The business will continue stronger than before. And somewhere out there, maybe Deborah has learned something from all of this. Maybe she understands now that being in charge does not mean you are above the law, or maybe not. People do not always learn the lessons they should, but that is not my problem anymore. I get in my truck and head home, leaving the lot behind, knowing it is safe and secure. The nightmare is over. The dust has settled. And life, as it always does, goes on. Just a guy with some dump trucks trying to make an honest living in Arizona, where apparently that is sometimes too much to ask, but where standing your ground still means something. Where justice, though sometimes slow, eventually comes around. And where security cameras are worth every penny you pay for them. The end.